are the Horror Bros. We are two bros who love horror, and we are showing horror movies to each other. I'm Ed.
Hi, I'm Logan. That's me. So there's a quote from the Blair Witch Project, because of course I have to make this about found footage. It's very hard to get lost in America these days, and it's even harder to stay lost. So we've got that on our side. There are countless stories about people thinking that they are above the rest of, the madness going on in the world and being better than all of the chaos outside of their door. But really, I think a prime example of that not being true is Lord of the Flies. It's a book by William Golding. Came out in the 1950s. And it's about a bunch of schoolboys who are stranded on an island and how they deal with the terrors outside of their door. But the kicker is there are no terrors outside of the door. It is all them. And all of the deaths and all the tragedies that occur are entirely their fault. And in the end, the only people they have to blame are themselves. And I thought about that while watching Night of the Living Dead by George Romero for the podcast this week.
That's very, very fitting. This week I suggested Night of the Living Dead. I thought it would be a great starting point for us when for starting this podcast, because this is what I would call like a trailhead. Like, this changed everything that came after it, especially in horror movies. Like, if I had to rank the movies that changed horror the most, this would be in the top three, if not number one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is such a big deal. And it is a good foundation for whenever we watch anything that came out after this. I was even like rewatching Evil Dead 2 last night, and I was like, oh wait, that reminds me of Night of the Living Dead. This movie has affected so much of the genre. It's a big one. But before we get too deep into Night of the Living Dead, how'd you get into horror movies?
It's always COVID, isn't it? It was in 2020. I had a lot of time on my hands, and I found this channel called Dead Meat on YouTube, and they do kill counts, where they count all the kills in your favorite horror movies. And that was my first real introduction to horror as a genre. And then, what year was it that you and me started actually watching horror movies together?
I don't exactly remember.
Because I want to say it was Black Christmas that was our first watch
I
together.
wanted I thought that our first watch together was Scream. I'm
That
pretty
could
sure,
also
but
be
I
one,
don't.
yeah.
I have no idea when that was though.
The first movie I have on my letterbox that I know I watched with you was A Nightmare on Elm Street, and that was May of 24.
Well, yeah, I think that was just like
Uh-huh.
once we were both on Letterboxd. I think
Yeah.
we watched
Uh-huh.
Scream and Black Christmas before we got on Letterboxd.
Yep.
So what's your like? Do you have a favorite subgenre?
Absolutely, I do. And Ed is so tired of hearing about this, but I am a found footage junkie. January of this year, January 12th, 2025, I watched Paranormal Activity on a whim because I was like, sure, let's watch it. That December, me and Ed had watched Wreck, which is a found footage movie also from 2007. That is a zombie movie, and it was fun. It was a good movie, but wow, still yawning. Don't do this to me. I then promptly watched all three sequels that really matter. Really, if I had to break it down, the only ones you really need to watch are the first two Paranormal Activities, and then I watched the first three Hell House movies, Hell House LLC. Still haven't seen the prequel, and then I've seen Grave Encounters, Taking of Deborah Logan, Creep, The Blair Witch Project, and The Last Exorcism. I think that makes like 12 horror movies, 12 found footage horror movies that I've watched. And it is, wow. I don't know, I didn't get enough sleep last night. And that has become my niche Even when I've watched movies like Sinister or The Descent, um, I've been like, oh, that's found footage, guys. That bit right there, that's found footage. You guys like that? You think it's scary? You should watch whole movies. That is my shit. I love it. Um, and I'm planning on watching more. I'm just gonna watch every single one I can get my hands on.
So if you had to define what horror is to you, like what would you say horror is, or what is it that you're looking for when you sit down to watch a horror movie?
Now, for me, I'm looking to actually be scared. That is my goal when walking into horror, and movies like Sinister and Creep and Hell House LLC have pulled that off great. Where the goal is to be scared, especially with found footage. Plot is a lot less important to these movies, and it's a lot about building the scares and just terrifying your audience. And for me, that's what I love about horror, and that's what horror means to me.
Cool. Maestro in horror is kind of weird.
Mm-hmm.
I think we were both had some similar temperaments as kids. You and I both, we used to be afraid of literally everything.
Yep.
And also our parents are not into horror, so that just
Mm.
like wasn't in our, it wasn't around us really. Um, I didn't really, I don't know if I watched a proper horror movie until I started like taking film classes. I think the first like horror film I watched might have been Get Out, in a high school film class. And that, I mean, I was watching it in a classroom over like two class periods. So that's not the situation. Like, if you want to be scared, that is not the situation to watch it in. If you don't want to be scared, then that's a nice way of
Yep.
lessening the impact a bit. Um, then for that class, I had to watch the original Nosferatu, the original Cabinet of Dr. Caligari,
Mm.
Psycho.
Good one.
Those were some of the biggest. And actually, it was in late high school that I watched Night of the Living Dead. I had an English teacher who put it on, and he was like, "Y'all need to watch this. This is like culture. Like, you should know this." When you just have free time, in the month of October, and he's like, "I'm putting on Night of the Living Dead because you need to know what this is. This is your education." Um, so thank you, Mr. Hedgepeth. I was not into it at the time because I didn't like, I wasn't into horror. That wasn't my thing. Um, Also, I'm not a huge zombie fan. I'm still not a huge zombie fan. Like, zombie apocalypse is not really my thing.
Well, by not really your thing, what do you mean? Like it scares you, or it just doesn't interest you?
Like, I find it okay. I don't really watch horror to be scared per se.
Mm-hmm.
Hot take. It's not a hot take because this is just my personal preference. I want it to try to scare me, absolutely, but I don't. I don't want to be scared. And there's something about um, like zombie apocalypse in the way of like just overwhelming numbers and their persistence, and like it even borders on like home invasion of like there's like hands trying to come
Mm-hmm.
through the windows trying to get
Yep.
at you, and you just like it's inevitable, and they just keep growing. That it gives such a sense of dread
Yeah.
that I don't like, as much as I appreciate this movie. Also, I mean, I would say like Shaun of the Dead is another one that has these things that freak me out, but they're still incredible movies. We got to get to Shaun of the Dead sometime.
It's on your
Um,
list. It's on you.
yeah, that is Shaun of the Dead is like perfect horror comedy. I have to say, it's good. It's solid, but that's not important right now. I don't know if like as far as favorite genres, I watch a lot of horror these days, but man, I kind of I watch a lot of stuff. I don't know if I have a specific genre. I am a fan of body horror,
Mm-hmm.
um, which I don't want to get off on a tangent about body horror because I mean I'll try to we'll talk about it at some point, but I think body horror is one of the things, I mean, I enjoy that other people get freaked out by it. It's one of those subgenres like home invasion that a lot of people find unapproachable and avoid at all costs because they get so uncomfortable with it. And I, like just from my experience, like it doesn't freak me out as much, and I enjoy when other people are freaked out.
I can
um,
get that.
I'm a huge fan of like David Cronenberg, David Lynch. Um, I love 80s. I love practical effects.
You love campy horror too, like Reanimator, Evil Dead,
Yeah,
movies like that.
okay, like it's like I have two favorite genres or categories of horror movies that I like, and one of them is the like serious, seriously scary Black Christmas. Maybe I put The Thing in there.
Yeah, I would.
Raw, maybe some Lynch. And then there's the other category, which is just camp, which is
Yup.
like, I'm here for fun and shenanigans. It's Reanimator, Evil Dead 2, Return of the Living Dead. I find that very fun.
Yep. So getting into Night of the Living Dead.
The killers are eating the flesh of the people they murdered.
Yeah, they're dead. They're all messed up.
Probably be a lot more of them as soon as they find out about us.
All persons who die during this crisis, from whatever cause, will come back to life to seek human victims.
I'm telling you, they can't get in here.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
I was gonna do a short plot synopsis. So you're introduced to these two characters, Barbara and I believe his name's John. Let me check. I think his name's John.
Johnny.
And they're going to a cemetery. They're gonna go, put flowers on their father's grave. And this guy comes along, stumbling, and attacks them, and kills Johnny. So Barbara runs away and gets into this house, and meets this guy Ben, who's an absolutely awesome character.
Played by Dwayne Jones.
And so basically the second middle part of the movie is them trying to figure out what the hell is going on, because zombie movies were not a thing. So this movie kind of defined zombies for everyone and for all the movies coming after. And then you meet Harry and a couple of other people, they're not important, that were in the basement this whole time and didn't do anything. Harry's a total asshole. He's just like, oh, we need to stay in the basement. You guys need to take orders from me. And Ben shuts that right down. Nuh-uh. We're staying up here because we can run. We can't escape the basement. So we're going to stay here. And then kind of the last half of the movie is them trying to get an escape plan. They have a truck, and it's almost out of gas. There's a gas pump on the property that's like maybe 500 feet away. So they have a plan where they throw Molotov cocktails at the zombies and get over to the gas pump. But long story short, the truck ends up exploding and kills two of the survivors. And then Ben runs back in, and then the zombies break in and kill everyone but Ben. And Ben is hiding in the basement when these gangs of policemen who are roaming around killing zombies come around, and they shoot and kill Ben because they think he's a zombie. And that's the end of the movie, with all of the survivors dead. And it's a really, really downer ending, especially with all these still photos of them disposing of the corpse. And I mean, I love endings that do that, but that is like heartbreaking.
Yeah, I do love a downer, but something I think there's something about the end credits sequence that feels so uncomfortably plausible
Yeah.
and very believable. I think even more so than the rest of the movie. that ending is, I mean, especially, okay, we're Americans. That feels so plausible. Like,
Yep. Mob
even
justice.
more than the zombie apocalypse. Yeah, and I remember this came out in 1968. So this was quite a moment for Americans.
Yeah.
The Vietnam War was going on, and especially how much of that violence people were seeing on television.
Yeah.
It was really something new. And that was something that the horror genre hadn't caught up to at that point. The 60s were a bit of a lull for American horror. There was Psycho in 1960. Otherwise, it was horror was still kind of in the gothic period pieces. It was,
Monster movies like Frankenstein and
yeah.
Dracula, right?
There was Hammer horror in
Yeah.
Britain. That was a lot of the Frankenstein,
Yeah.
Dracula, literary adaptations. I know there was some stuff going on in Mexico, but as far as American horror, it was a bit of a lull
Yeah.
at this. I mean, because there was also, of course, the rise of television, which started, kind of like back in the 50s. Television was, a huge competitor to the film industry. And then you're getting all these grotesque images and all this violence you're hearing about on your television about like the Vietnam War.
Mm-hmm.
And this movie was a breakthrough in the genre, like actually dealing with that, which I think like effective horror always has to connect with something that people are feeling in that moment, in that place.
Mm-hmm.
The one other horror film that like I can remember that came out in that year was Rosemary's Baby, which it's still supernatural. It's a little more mundane. It's
Mm-hmm.
just like a couple living in an apartment in New York, but it does not feel the same as this. This is gritty.
Yeah.
68 was also like the year that the motion picture production code like finally died. It had been fading, since like 63, since the early 60s. It had been declining in its effectiveness, and also because like, okay, Psycho was really barely made it past, the censorship, but it was so successful that that really diminished the power of the production code when those risque movies are making a lot of money. And 1968 was when, okay, then we would get the MPAA, which would introduce a totally different system of censorship. And instead of just, oh, you get a stamp or you don't, it is a system of ratings, it's a
Mm-hmm.
scale. Like, after this point, horror is wildly different, and that's because this movie existed, and also because of some of the technology that was emerging, and also because those production codes changed. So there is a
Yeah.
lot going on that this movie was like one of the first dominoes in that process.
It gets into a lot of the history, and I was just gonna get into the movie and like what the movie was like. Like you're outclassing me on so many
There
levels
was a bit I
here.
totally forgot to do. Not to get academic on you again, but
Oh no.
as far as how I classify horror movies, the way I think of horror movies is a lot more general and vague than just, oh, is it scary? There's an article written by the feminist scholar Barbara Creed called "Horror and the Monstrous Feminine: An Imaginary Objection." In this article, she's building upon a theory that was previously articulated by another writer, Julia Kristeva. And Kristeva came up with the idea of the theory of objection, or the abject. In short, the abject is any symbol which represents a transgression of the boundary between human and non human. The abject is, by definition, anything that cannot be categorized, and therefore is a threat to the self and society. In fact, the confrontation with social boundaries could even be framed as the social responsibility of the genre. Basically, so I would classify horror as like a genre that deals with things that transgress something that is usually clearly defined, in our consciousness and in our society. So, like a zombie,
Mm-hmm.
usually something is either living or it is dead. And a zombie is transgressing that boundary, and that is, and it threatens our society, and also it makes us feel threatened as things that are alive. And we're like, it is something disgusting. It is it can possibly kill us.
There is a scientist that comes on the news in Night of the Living Dead and says, the dead bodies must be burned. You will have to forego the, I think the quote is like, dubious comforts of a funeral. And I think that would fit into your definition very well. The sort of, this tradition that we've held to be, so sacred or something like that, so comforting, so sacred, is being thrown out the window because we've got to survive. And this whole mess going on with zombies is making us throw that away. Overthrowing old traditions is often kind of a fear for older people, or for, I mean, pretty much anyone.
Pretty much anyone.
Yeah, of new ideas, overthrowing the old.
I also think of like, so there's the little girl who's in the basement,
Yep.
who has been bitten. And first of all, I forget that like they're not aware of the zombie bite rules in this movie because, well, the characters don't know that yet. The idea of, socially, you want to take care of a child and make sure that like they get help, they get medical attention. But in this case of a zombie apocalypse, what you need to do is destroy them, which is so contrary to
Yeah.
everything that we've been socialized to do. Um, and so it's everything thrown upside down.
Yeah. I mean, and then also the kind of general respect that we give to the dead. When Ben goes into the basement near the end, he pretty much immediately shoots at both Harry and his wife, who come back as zombies, and their dead corpses. So immediately, what would traditionally be like, oh, that's just facing, a body. But practically, that is, in this universe, that is a very, very necessary step. That just throws those, notions away of, respecting the dead. Because, well, they're trying to kill us. So, what are you going to do?
There's another piece of this that I'm thinking of. Okay, so they're sitting around watching the television, and the television is telling them bits and pieces of information about how this is a zombie apocalypse. Um, and usually in this case, this would, okay, the writing rule, show don't tell.
Yep.
So usually this would be a case of like, oh, you're telling, not showing exactly. But I think it works in this case because first of all, that's not exactly the focus of the movie. The focus of the movie is on this group of people in this one particular location. But also, I was just, like really remembering 2020, and we're all sitting in our houses and we just watch the news, and like we have no way of knowing
Yeah.
what is happening outside or not. We know what they're telling us to do, and sometimes like that leads us to situations of very hard decisions, and a lot of times the information that we're getting is confusing or contradictory. But just that, like sitting in your living room watching the news and just getting bits of information, and of course how that leads to just people fighting amongst themselves about
Yep.
the most pointless things. And I'm like, yeah, we got to live through that. So this movie is just even more resonant.
Yep. Hoarding all the toilet paper in the basement. That's Harry.
Yeah. Yeah, did you have any other like immediate thoughts when you were watching this?
Immediate thoughts. There was a moment that stood out to me. That even the videos I watched didn't exactly pick up on it. When Barbara is first getting chased and she runs into the house and the zombie comes behind her, he takes out the phone lines. I'm pretty sure it's a line that goes out from the house and it goes down to the ground, and he gets tangled up with it and rips it down. And immediately, Barbara goes to call like 911 and it doesn't work. And that's a trope in every single horror movie. is having
Yeah,
to write
I didn't see that. Yeah.
having to write out the phones, because phones, damn it, it used to be as easy as taking out the phone line. Now you have to like actually take the phones, or like jam the Wi-Fi, because without the Wi-Fi we're screwed. But that was a
Man.
fun little bit that they wrote, that they put in the movie. He takes down the phone lines by accident, and that's just hilarious.
I wonder what this movie would be like if the phone worked, because I don't know if it would change very much about the plot. Honestly.
Yeah, the conflict would more be like, should we wait for rescue because we know they're coming, or like, do we assume that they're not coming, or etc., etc. But yeah,
That
it
would
would
be
be still very
interesting.
similar, because Harry would still probably be like, let's stay, they're going to come, you know.
Uh, Actually, that reminds me of actually something like that kind of happens in Return of the Living Dead, where they call for paramedics. The paramedics show up and they just get swarmed by zombies, and so like they're like, oh, we waited all this time, and then oh well, there they go.
Oof.
Okay, what are we gonna do now?
Yeah. Props to the intro for really building up the tension and having I believe it's a Pontiac Le Mans car, 19. What year was that? 63 maybe? A Pontiac Le Mans? Um, but the notes I made was the music and the sound design are properly creepy. Um, and um, also the quote, "They're coming to get you, Barbara," is just iconic. Out of all of the, lines in horror movies, it comes from one brother teasing his sister.
Yeah, I first of all, I feel like that first scene. I feel like I've seen it like 100 times because I used it for a class assignment because this is in the public domain, so I could use it
Yep.
as part of an editing assignment. But I love how it's just very, very sibling behavior, of the
Yep.
just like teasing each other and just like bickering. And like I get the vibe that Johnny is, just being an asshole because like he's uncomfortable at the cemetery,
Mm-hmm.
or that
And he's
he's
ticked off. He
scared.
had to drive like three
So
hours.
so he just is trying to bully Barbara.
Yep.
Also, I thought of also another reason why I thought of this movie for this episode was the first line. She mentions they ought to make the time change the first day of summer. Um, and like when I suggested this movie to you, it was like a week or so like after time change. So I was
Yeah,
like,
that.
this just feels fitting. Also, I love how he says what, what. It's just
Yep.
funny.
Well, I think that provides a great transition to looking at letterboxd reviews for this movie, because there was one that I love. Johnny starts out being an absolute pain to Barbara, but then the moment a threat arrives, he throws himself at a zombie with no regard for his own safety to protect her, and this is possibly the most accurate depiction of siblings. And that
Seriously.
that one I love. Also, the "I'm Afraid of Americans" one is great.
Seriously.
And then
Awesome.
Barbara is me whenever anything goes slightly wrong in my life. Which, yeah, that's a big part of this movie, is that Barbara ceases to be a character about 5 minutes in.
I think I liked a couple of those same reviews.
Yeah.
There one review that I liked that, just so happened to come from one of my good friends. On Letterboxd, Matthew says, "Genuine fucking masterpiece, but they really did not let women talk in this movie."
Hmm.
He's not wrong.
Honestly, Barbara is what every single misogynistic asshole character thinks in movies when they see other women in horror movies. So like that dude who's like getting ticked off at all the women, just imagine that all he's seeing is Barbara's, and that's it. He's got the Barbara glasses on, and he sees all these women as Barbara's. Um,
Yeah.
which I mean, it was a little bit frustrating to have Barbara disappear as a character, but I mean, it wasn't that bad because we got Ben. Um,
I
and
I
Ben
I
protecting her and being nice to her, even though like he did get angry at her. He was like, woman, and then he like calms
yeah.
down. He's like, this lady's brother just died, and we're all in a zombie apocalypse. So just chill out.
Yeah.
Just chill out on it.
If I that is one of my frustrations with this movie, as as good as it is. Um Barbara and whatever the other blonde lady
Like
was.
Judy?
Her name, Judy or something.
Judy. And then Helen Cooper.
I think Helen is awesome. Um,
Yeah, she
it's
is.
just the fact that the Barbara and Judy,
They
they
don't do
don't
much for
get
the story.
much. They don't get much to work with, like from the story. Now, I mean, Judy's boyfriend, okay, he's wishy washy, but
But he's also not a bad character.
I can accept that because he's standing between Ben and Harry, and who are so at odds with each other.
Yeah.
I appreciate that he's kind of like, okay, he's like a moderate.
Yeah.
How did I forget to talk about Ben? Because he's awesome.
Dude, he is a badass. He's awesome.
He was this time around when I was watching it, I was really reminded of Kurt Russell in The Thing,
Yep.
of McCready as that kind of.
Shut up, listen to me. Let's get through this. Yeah.
He's very like Machiavellian, of like
True.
just listen to me because if you disagree with me, we're gonna be worse off. Not necessarily that my ideas are the perfect ones, but I'm saying if we're just around here bickering, then that's worse.
We're all gonna die. Yep.
And also, yeah, Ben has no time for bullshit. I mean, it's great.
After Harry locks him out, he straight up shoots him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just
Yeah.
shut up, man. Get back in your basement.
Not to bring it back to the ending, but
Oh no.
I don't know if this movie would have been what it is and what makes it so influential
Yeah.
if it didn't end in that exact way.
Yeah.
As dismal as it is. I mean, I think of Vietnam again. American soldiers in Vietnam. When you're told to just go mow down everything in sight and you're not checking whether someone is friend or foe or if they're just a civilian, you're just shooting everything in sight and causing so much collateral damage.
Yeah. Yeah. And in the end, we it's similar ending Vietnam War and this movie, which is a gross oversimplification, but I mean, we lost Vietnam. We did not win, and we didn't gain anything, and we lost a lot of lives.
Yeah.
And so,
Before we
that,
finish up, I previously mentioned how this film is in the public domain. So
Oh, yeah.
apparently, there were some issues with distributing this film, especially because censorship rules were changing. But also, there was a change of the title. So apparently, the Walter Reed organization agreed to show the film uncensored, but changed the title from Night of the Flesh Eaters to Night of the Living Dead because there was an existing film with a similar title. But while they were changing the title, they accidentally deleted the copyright notice. So therefore, it was in the public domain. So people could do whatever they wanted with it and made, a shitload of bootlegs, which I think that's one of the reasons why this movie is so influential is because
Mhm.
it got that extra proliferation and more people were able to see it and they were like, oh wait, this is in public domain. I could copy this or I could watch this.
Yeah.
And I think that has actually built the history around this movie partially.
Yep.
Now that there's a lot of consequences to that as well, especially when they're going forward. Um, There's some.
I think this movie is also the default movie to have on a TV screen within a horror movie, because it's in the public domain. So, 9 times out of 10, if you're watching a horror movie and in the horror movie characters are watching a horror movie, they're watching, or like The Thing from Outer Space, or but also Night of the Living Dead. I don't know of any movies that I've seen that have that in it. I can only think of like Scream, but Scream had Halloween in it.
I mean, I can tell you that I'm working on a short film right now, and I'm planning on putting Night of the Living Dead on a television
Yeah.
just because it's public domain. Like,
Woo-hoo!
look, I'm broke, okay? You do what
Yep,
you
I mean,
can.
Yep.
jumping a little bit. So you've heard of the movie Return of the Living Dead, which is also a series, and it's got several sequels in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're confused, don't worry, you're not alone. Everyone is confused and was confused about what the hell was going on between Return of the Living Dead and Night of the Living Dead, because Night of the Living Dead has its own sequels that were directed by George Romero. The original Night of the Living Dead was co-written between George Romero and John Russo. And then a little while later, John Russo wrote a novel called Return of the Living Dead as a sequel to Night of the Living Dead, and then started working on a screenplay. And then eventually it started to get made into a movie. Romero and his associates attempted to block Fox from marketing this film as a sequel, and they demanded that the name would be changed, and there was a court case. It's kind of a mess. So I think at the end of the day, Return of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead are both direct sequels to Night of the Living Dead, but it's a split between George Romero and John Russo's stories.
Mm-hmm.
Generally speaking, they came to an agreement of, okay, so George Romero has of the Dead, and then John Russo got the Living Dead. So that if that kind of clears things up a bit, it is very confusing. And that was, of course, complicated legally by the fact that the original Night of the Living Dead didn't have copyright protection. So it was a bit of a mess. All that being said, like, Return of the Living Dead is a fantastic movie. That copyright thing came back to haunt them.
Ooh. I just know that there is a found footage movie, Diary of the Dead. I believe that is directed by.
I think that's Romero.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I believe that's Romero. And now on to what we're going to be watching next.
So this was basically my movie pick. So now
If you
it
couldn't
is
tell
Logan's
by
turn.
how much Ed has talked about it, you know a lot about this movie. Props to you.
I mean, look, there's other movies that I know more about, but anyway, so the format of this show is that, I'm going to pick a movie, and then Logan's going to pick a movie, and then we're going to switch
Yep.
back and forth. Occasionally, we're going to throw in a movie that we both like, or that's just seasonally appropriate, but generally, we're going to be bouncing back and forth, and we're exposing each
Yep.
other to different sides of horror.
Yep. And I have two movies that I would like to propose, and I'll give you a brief synopsis and let you kind of choose which one you think would be better. I have my preference because I know which one I prefer, but two movies. Number one suggestion is Grave Encounters 2011, obviously found footage, is a group of paranormal investigator people that are making a TV show, lock themselves into a haunted asylum, and stuff gets wacky. And that one is amazing. I don't want to spoil that for you, but it gets really good. And then my other one is a seasonally appropriate one for like Return of the Dead. The Taking of Deborah Logan, 2014, is a couple of college students doing a video documentary on Alzheimer's, and they are following this woman named Deborah Logan and her struggles with Alzheimer's, and something a little bit deeper and more sinister than that. That one I don't think is quite as good. But they're both good intros to found footage because I'm not going to suggest like Hell House because that's not a beginner to found footage movie.
I mean, I've seen like 3 found footage movies.
Wreck, Paranormal Activity, and Blair
I've
Witch.
seen
Right?
Wreck, Blair Witch, and Paranormal Activity.
Woo! Yes.
So I don't think you could count me as like a total novice.
True. But I think I go with Grave Encounters just because conceptually and the way they pull it off is I really like it.
The one thing that makes me curious about Deborah Logan is like the possibility of like body horror, which you tell me how much they actually go into that or not, because if it doesn't end up being a whole lot of body horror, then I'm like, okay, well, you told me it was bad.
No, very, very little, actually.
That's so disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, it is found footage. You don't see a lot. But no, even with that, Taking of Deborah Logan does not, hate to burst your bubble, it does not go that direction. As much as you would think. It has some.
That's so sad.
But I think you might like
So
Grave
then
Encounters.
I would go with like Grave Encounters,
All right.
honestly, because also you told me that like it was good. So and
Yeah,
Deborah
no, I
Logan
have my
said it was
preference. I
bad.
should have just said that walking in. But that is settled. Going
I do
up
like
next
Haunted, so
Yes, it is very, very haunted.
I like a good haunting.
Yep. So we are going with Grave Encounters from 2011, directed by Stuart Ortiz and Colin Minahan. And I think that's on Tubi, if you want to watch it.
Available on lots of free streaming services,
That
which is
cool.
wonderful.
All right, well, prepare yourself for that, because that's going to be a wild ride. A really good
Okay.
one. And, well, that's it for us, the Horror Bros. Have a good one.
Alrighty, peace out.